Get out of here, you worthless woman.
In front of me, glaring at me as if with deep contempt, is my husband. When he calls me worthless woman, I instinctively touch my own stomach. I've suffered for this belly, giving birth to 3 daughters with my husband. But what my husband wanted was a son. I still remember being told, when I gave birth to our eldest daughter, and then our second daughter, next time, it'll be a boy. When our third daughter was born, my husband even left the naming entirely up to me. I sighed, feeling like divorce might be inevitable. Tommy, my husband, just smirked faintly.
Don't worry about an heir. There's already someone who'll give birth to a boy.
I'm Angie, a full-time housewife. I've just turned 40. I'm currently living with my husband, Tim, and our 3 daughters. It's been 3 years since I gave birth to our third daughter. This month, I've decided to quit being a full-time housewife and start working. That's because with just my husband's income, it's impossible to afford the extracurricular activities for our 2 older daughters. I've decided to work for the sake of our 3 children. Fortunately, I found a job quickly, and now I'm working while also covering our household expenses. But lately, my husband has been complaining more and more about how we need to take care of his aging parents because they are getting older.
I'd really appreciate it if you could quit your job to take care of my parents, Angie.
It's still too much to ask.
What's that? With my salary alone, we can live comfortably if we're not extravagant, right?
I haven't been extravagant at all. I'm working because with just your income, we can't afford extracurricular activities for the kids.
We don't need them to have extracurricular activities. They don't have to learn anything.
This is how my husband always complains to me. So, whenever this topic comes up, I've learned to deal with it casually.
Are you listening, Angie?
I understand. I'll try to help out. Honestly, I'm not fond of my in-laws. So, deep down, I don't want to cooperate with their care. But my husband and I live near his parents' house. When we got married, my husband suggested we start our married life in an apartment near his parents' house. At the time, I didn't know his parents' true nature, so I casually agreed, thinking, that'll make things easier for me too. But soon enough, I witnessed their true colors. It was about 6 months into our marriage. My mother-in-law asked me to help clear out a space to put a big table they'd bought so we could all gather. And when I went to help at my in-laws, that's when it happened. I was treated like a servant by my in-laws, constantly being told to put that over there, clean this up, bring out the tea, and so on. As a newlywed, I didn't know how to handle it, so I just went along with whatever my in-laws said. Because of that, every time I visited my in-laws, the treatment got worse and worse. Every visit to my in-laws' house felt like being treated as a servant, forced to listen to my in-laws' old stories and tales of hardship for tens of minutes. And then, they'd end by saying, "Hurry up and give birth to a male heir," even meddling in our private life.
That's because having a boy is better. Actually, there's no point in giving birth if it's not a boy.
Even my husband, who wanted children, says things like this. When I got pregnant, the only thing my husband and in-laws cared about was the baby's gender. When they found out our first was a girl, I was berated and subjected to hurtful words.
It's just the balance. Having a son would be nice, you know.
And when the second and third were also girls, my in-laws blatantly lost interest in them. All my in-laws have ever said is, "You must give birth to a boy next time."
Why is the house always messy, even though there's no rowdy boy playing around? Blaming busyness, you can't even clean properly. Because you're such an negligent woman, maybe that's why you can't give birth to a boy.
Even though you've only given birth to girls, you'll end up marrying them off elsewhere anyway. If you're not going to produce an heir, you should focus on serving us, the heads of the family.
This is how they speak, despite being their own grandchildren. I didn't want to go to a house I wasn't invited to and didn't want to visit, to be treated like this. It's unbearable. I've told my husband many times that I want to keep my distance from my in-laws, but it never resonates.
The house being messy is a fact, isn't it? Girls are supposed to quietly play with picture books, right? So why is it so messy? If you can't even handle cleaning, which is supposed to be a woman's job, maybe that's why you can't produce a boy.
I don't think it's fair to say that housework and childcare is my wife's job when we both work and raise 3 kids.
If you're going to use work as an excuse, why not just quit and become a housewife? If you can't do that, then maybe what Mom is saying is true, isn't it?
Do you think you can support me and our 3 daughters with your income alone? That's why I'm working too. His words give me a headache. Sure, in the past, it was an era where the husband worked outside and the wife protected the home and children. But now, it's not that era anymore. It's become commonplace for wives to work too. Accepting that as the flow of the times, to say that household chores and childcare are still solely a wife's job is just too antiquated. No matter how many times I explain, my husband doesn't change. Mom's right, exactly what Dad says. Every time those words are thrown back at me, divorce crosses my mind. But my daughters, who know nothing, are attached to my husband. Only our eldest, a middle schooler, seems to have some reservations about my husband. Probably due to her adolescence, she doesn't seem to interact much with him. Still, when I see our youngest innocently smiling and begging for a hug from her daddy, I can't bring myself to divorce. Then, around 3 months later, something strange started happening. For some reason, my husband's return home became increasingly delayed. Suspicious, I asked him about it when he finally came home. "Tim, you've been coming home unusually late lately. Is something going on at work?"
Nah, just happened to be. One of my team members messed up today, so I had to stay overtime. Don't worry about it.
The words my husband spoke, I believed them at first. But as time passed, and he started coming home late more often, I began to question. He'd say, got held up with entertaining clients, or meeting with partners ran long. Despite feeling suspicious about my husband's behavior and actions, I couldn't muster the courage to confront him, afraid of taking away the beloved father from my children. I began to live as if I didn't mind my husband's late returns. This continued for about 6 months, until one day, a coworker said something to me.
I saw him walking with a young woman in the downtown area.
He's at work. There's no way that's possible. I told her so, but
I couldn't have mistaken it.
she insisted. We were close friends, often going camping or having barbecues together with our families due to our kids being around the same age. My friendly husband and this coworker always got along well when they met. So I knew she wouldn't mistake my husband for someone else. But even knowing that, I desperately wanted to believe in my husband.
When we meet next time, should I say something?
Feeling my heart stop momentarily at her words. I'll talk to my husband properly, I assured her. Though what she saw wasn't my husband, I hoped it was just a mistake. I visited a detective right after work to request an investigation. 5 days later, the detective contacted me, saying it was quite straightforward. When I met the detective after work, I was given substantial evidence. There were several photos of my husband entering a hotel with another woman, and the results were damning. Deciding to confront my husband about his infidelity as soon as I got home. Even though he had come home before me, he was just sitting in the living room, scrolling on his phone. I saw my eldest daughter taking her younger sisters to their room as soon as she noticed my presence. Feeling sorry for them, I couldn't hold back from confronting my husband about the affair. Tim, care to explain what this is all about? I've been hearing excuses about overtime and entertaining clients, but is going to a hotel with a business partner considered entertainment now? My husband remained silent, his face turning cold as he started dialing a number somewhere. For some reason, my husband has decided to remain silent and not talk to me. Why won't you say anything? Does your silence mean you're admitting to it?
It's got nothing to do with you, Angie.
You think it's okay to cheat on your wife and pretend like it doesn't concern her?
It's got nothing to do with you.
No matter how many times I asked, all my husband said was, "It's got nothing to do with me." Then suddenly, the intercom in our house started ringing. Thinking it was a bad time, but considering feigning ignorance, my husband immediately went to answer the door. It was my in-laws who came in through the door. And there she was, the woman from the photos I received from the detective. What's going on? Did you call them?
I wasn't planning on telling the truth until everyone was here.
Well, everyone's here now, so explain, what's the meaning of these photos? I confronted my husband again, thrusting the photos in his face.
Angie, she's pregnant with a boy. Our family needs a male heir to carry on the lineage. I've been saying this to you even before we got married. We need a boy in our family. And yet, you've given birth to nothing but girls, Angie. So you're of no use anymore. Get out immediately.
My husband, finally talking properly, came at me with absurd accusations while handing me divorce papers. Wait a minute, pregnant, what does that mean? How far did you go for that to happen? Sure, I knew about the desire for a son, but there's no way to choose the gender, right? Besides, weren't you fond of our daughters?
You were the one who could only give birth to a girl while listening to Tim. If you are such a person, shut up and leave this house.
I am sorry, but I am not talking to mother-in-law right now. I am talking to Tim. Tim, please explain to me what the hell is going on. I questioned my husband, and for some reason my parents-in-law entered the conversation.
Angie, you've always been someone who couldn't give birth to anything but girls despite Tim's wishes. It's best for you to leave quietly.
I'm sorry, but I'm not talking to father-in-law right now. I'm talking to Tim. So why are the two of you interfering? Please don't try to change the subject. Despite my protest, my husband let out a heavy sigh.
Enough now. Don't we? We don't need to discuss anything. All you need to do is leave this house quietly.
What are you saying? We have 3 daughters, and surely you understand that with my current income alone, it's impossible to support all 3, right, Tim?
It's got nothing to do with me. You wanted to have all girls, didn't you? Just get out.
Don't be ridiculous. What do you mean wanted to have? You used to care for all 3 of them, didn't you? Why are you suddenly saying this? As I expected my husband to say something in response to my words, it was his affair partner who retorted.
This is why dealing with older women is such a hassle. If you're told to leave, you should just leave without fuss.
What's your problem? It's your appearance that's making things complicated in the first place.
Complicated? It's just because the wife couldn't bear a son, isn't it?
The affair partner smirked while looking at me. Somewhere deep down, I realized I had been expecting too much from my husband. With 3 children, and the youngest daughter adoring Tim so much, I desperately wanted to believe that divorce wasn't the only right answer. Even my husband thought that if he was confronted with the evidence, his children would be on his mind. I believed that even if I could not reform and become a good family friend, he would be a good father in front of his children. But in reality, he just brazenly brought his affair partner even in front of our children, showing no remorse. I understand, I'll divorce you. I've had enough, I was too naive. Feeling this acutely, I stood up and went to pack my things. Though I felt a pang of irritation towards the affair partner, who was smirking as she watched me, I didn't care anymore. I snatched the divorce papers from Tim and signed them hurriedly. I wrote my name as the custodian for our daughters. I'll take custody of all 3 daughters. I'll demand compensation and child support later. I'll leave for now, but I'll come back for the things I can't take with me later.
Do whatever you want.
Even my usually sarcastic in-laws listened to our conversation without making any snide remarks, though they looked displeased. It seemed they were leaving this discussion to Tim. That's how my husband, knowing all that, came at me all bold-faced. I sensed the tension and hugged my eldest daughter, who was peeking from the room. Was that all it took for her to get the message? My eldest daughter glared at my husband and immediately started packing. Maybe my second and third daughters think we're just going out to play, as they cheerfully prepare their outing sets. Even as we headed to the front door with our minimal luggage, no one emerged from the living room. My second and third daughters seemed puzzled, but they happily waved goodbye and left the house. I contacted my parents' home. Due to the distance, I've only returned home a few times since getting married. It was a sudden call, but my mother immediately said to come back whenever I could. Since they were coming to pick us up, we decided to stay overnight at a hotel. There, without telling my daughters about my husband's affair, I said this to them. Mom and Dad, our paths have diverged. My two young daughters, who love certain artist group and had heard this from a recently disbanded group, seemed to understand.
That means they can't be together anymore, right?
My eldest daughter seemed to grasp my words. I returned with my daughters to my parents' house, where I was constantly busy with paperwork such as changing the family register and various other name changes and administrative procedures. And before I knew it, 2 months had passed, and I successfully received compensation and child support from my husband and his affair partner. I demanded compensation for adultery from both of them, and I also claimed child support from my husband. I didn't want to see their faces anymore, so I decided to involve lawyers in everything. It costs money, but I think it's a good investment because it relieves stress. According to the lawyer who went to see my in-laws, they fell silent like they had eaten a bitter bug when the topic of compensation and child support came up. However, it would tarnish their reputation if their son got another woman pregnant due to his infidelity. To prevent further escalation, both my husband and my in-laws desperately pooled their resources to pay for it. Moreover, it seems that my husband and in-laws even took on the compensation for the affair partner's share. Then, another 3 months passed. Although we couldn't afford luxuries, with the support of our parents, we began to lead a peaceful life as a family of 6. Both my daughters and I were gradually getting used to the absence of my husband. On a day off from work, my husband suddenly called. He kept calling repeatedly when I ignored it. Thinking that it would be troublesome if he kept calling until my daughters returned from their lessons, I reluctantly answered the call from my husband.
Thank goodness. You finally picked up the phone.
What do you want all of a sudden?
Well, you see, the affair partner gave birth the other day.
What am I supposed to say to that? Just as I was about to coldly end the call, my husband suddenly raised his voice.
The baby's sex.
According to my husband, the affair partner gave birth to a girl. And it wasn't a case of misjudgment during the ultrasound. Apparently, the doctor had confirmed it was a girl from the beginning. The reason the affair partner lied about the gender of the child she was pregnant with was to marry my husband. Apparently, my husband had been considering divorce if the child wasn't a boy, but it was my in-laws who put a stop to it. They were worried about not having any grandchildren, so my husband halted the divorce. He immediately wanted to think about having another child, but our daily life was too chaotic for that. With the baby just born, I had no job and no income. When I tried to focus on housework to perfection, I was told that it was impossible because of childcare responsibilities, and I firmly refused to take care of my in-laws. Well, it's understandable given that we were living with a baby whose neck hasn't even stabilized yet. I'm so focused on the baby that it's difficult to do housework as perfectly as before childbirth, and I don't have the physical or mental capacity for taking care of my in-laws. Despite living with such a new bride, my husband suddenly mentioned divorce. So, what's the point of telling me this? I said coldly.
Angie, please, can't we start over?
My husband said to me, "Oh, it's way too late for you to think we can reconcile." I snapped at my husband.
Don't say that. Angie, please, there's something delicate about you, like a rose with thorns. I love that about you. So, let's give it another try.
My husband tried to persuade me with overly poetic words. His words sent a chill down my spine.
Angie, are you listening? We've been together for a long time, right? Just because we've been a little distant. Your feelings haven't changed, have they?
Maybe his words of love would have resonated with me when we first got married. But considering my husband's affair and our subsequent divorce, even if he says such things, all I feel now is coldness. I chuckled with a wry smile.
Your smile means you're forgiving me, right?
My husband said, misunderstanding. How are you just plain stupid? That was a wry smile. I'm not laughing, and I haven't forgiven you.
Why are you saying that? Angie, please, consider starting over. We've always managed well, right? You've been happy until now, haven't you?
It wasn't going well. That's why we argued so much. I wasn't happy. That's why I divorced you. Besides, you were the one who said you didn't need me.
Isn't that right? So, we can start over, right? I was the one who initiated the breakup. And now I'm suggesting we start over. So, let's do it.
My husband started saying all sorts of crazy things to reconcile with me. He even brought up things from the past, and honestly, I was getting fed up. But then, I suddenly had an idea and changed the topic of the conversation. You know about Henri.
What? How do you know Henri's name? We didn't even do introductions back then, did we?
My husband seemed surprised that I mentioned his remarriage partner's name. Of course I know. I heard it from the detective, and I even sent a certified letter for the alimony claim. So, she's my girlfriend.
What does Henri say?
Well, now I'm wondering who she's targeting next. You see, she enjoys interfering with happy couples and breaking them up. So, after divorcing you, I wondered who her next target would be. My husband remained silent. Was he dumbfounded, mouth agape? Regardless, I continued explaining to him what I knew about Henri. I described how Henri had always been cute since childhood, always surrounded by various people. How even her father, the company president, doted on her, buying her whatever she wanted, making her a bit spoiled. And how because she could have anything, taking things from others became a hobby. As she grew up, her targets became boyfriends, fiancés, husbands, and other men. Because she enjoyed taking, she would easily discard them after getting what she wanted. When I introduced her social circle investigated by the detective, my husband seemed taken aback.
What the hell? Why are you saying this now? If you had told me when we were divorcing, I wouldn't have gone through all this.
At that time, you just told us to leave. You didn't even bother listening to our side. So, we just did what you said. Besides, it's not like it's reasonable for a woman who knows you're married to approach you.
Don't talk like that, Angie. You're being unfair. You're making it seem like it's all my fault. If only you had explained properly back then, things would have been different.
My husband suddenly sounded dejected, playing the victim card. My anger surged at his words, and I snapped at my husband. After cheating, what's with that tone? It's not like it's bad, it's you who's bad. From now on, live however you want. I don't care anymore. To my words, my husband suddenly adopted a gentle tone.
Angie, it's going to be tough for you to raise 3 daughters alone, right? Even if I take just one and raise her by myself. So please hand over one of the 3 to me. If you do that, it'll be easier for you, Angie. Having just 2 kids is enough, right?
The sickeningly sweet tone of his proposal made my head spin. What does he even think of our daughters? Sending them to such a man is absolutely unthinkable. Neither my husband nor my in-laws truly care about the well-being of our daughters. My husband repeatedly talks as if anyone will do, or it's fine with just one, or in a way that dehumanizes them. All I can see is a future where my daughters will be crushed by my husband and in-laws as they grow older. As they grow up, they'll understand the mistreatment they've been subjected to, just like me. That's why I firmly refused. Don't be ridiculous. I'll raise my daughters properly.
Don't say that. Children still need a father, right?
My husband retorted with stubbornness. A father who can't even properly take care of his children, let alone indulge in infidelity, has no right to claim custody. To prevent my husband from misunderstanding even the slightest bit, I spoke assertively. It's up to the girls to decide if they want a father like that or not. They're still young, so until they can make their own judgments, I'll responsibly raise them. With fury, I ended the call with my husband. Perhaps it was due to immediately blocking his calls, but I never heard from him again after that. Several more months passed. It seems that my husband's divorce from Henri also went smoothly. Henri took the newborn child and returned to her parents' home. Apparently, the father of the newborn child was also married. So not only my husband but also his real wife is demanding compensation. Perhaps facing economic difficulties, she seems to be striving in childcare while receiving support from her parents at home. It's terrifying that she shows no sign of remorse even now. She acknowledges her wrongdoing and shows sincerity by paying compensation if caught. However, it seems that her father, who is the company president, advances the money for this, and she leads a carefree life. It turns out her meddling with my husband was just a whim. With her natural beauty and status, she freely took other people's boyfriends and married men as she pleased, and now she has set her sights on married men as her next target. She apparently wanted to turn married men's heads, and happened to spot us, a married couple, in the street. It's quite a nuisance to have our lives ruined on a whim like that. And the reason Henri decided to marry my husband, which usually ends once she takes what she wants, was because my husband was indecisive and too lenient with Henri. Henri was apparently looking for a man who would treat her like a princess, listen to her every whim, and buy her whatever she wanted if she decided to marry. I feel indifferent about it now. My husband, who easily succumbed to her, and Henri, his mistress, are both unbelievable, and I was speechless with disbelief. While my husband was deceived by his mistress, he could have also declined her advances. No matter what stories I hear, the fact that my husband betrayed me remains unchanged. I heard that my husband's family had been abandoned by friends and relatives and had moved far away. After moving, they unexpectedly stormed into my house only once.
Angie, stop playing around and give us one of the kids.
That's right. It's not good for you to raise them alone. So we'll raise them together.
Please stop. I'll manage raising them on my own, so it's okay. Perhaps they thought it would be okay since my youngest daughter was still very young. The three of them had fierce expressions and tried to take away my youngest daughter, so I resisted desperately.
It's impossible for you. You can't raise them while working. Hand her over.
Angie, it's pitiful. We'll take good care of her, so don't worry.
They wouldn't listen to anything I said.
Stop. Don't take her away. That's kidnapping.
My youngest daughter cried loudly, and I shouted back just as loudly, refusing to back down. The nearby residents heard our voices and quickly subdued the three of them. Soon after, the police arrived in response to the report, and the three were taken away. I thanked the neighbors repeatedly and rejoiced in my youngest daughter's safety. Afterward, the three of them were issued a restraining order. However, this incident made me consider moving again. Ultimately, I couldn't feel safe just because of the order. Since their whereabouts were known, there was always a possibility that those three would come back. If I discussed it with my parents, who lived with us, they said it would be a nuisance if they were to be harassed forever, so they decided to sell the house and move with me. However, I still felt sorry for repeatedly changing my daughter's environment. But just watching my daughters smile and grow healthy made me feel better. To protect them, I decided to move to a new place. Shortly before the move, a call came from an unregistered number. Thinking it was the moving company or someone from the municipal office, I answered, but it turned out to be Henri, of all people. After summarizing her tearful ramblings about having contracted a serious illness from having too many relationships with men, she begged for treatment and demanded the return of the compensation she had paid. I coldly replied to her pleas. "You have a wonderful sugar daddy who buys you everything, right? I have nothing to do with you." Without waiting for much of a response, I hung up. I blocked her on the spot and immediately bought a new cell phone so that she couldn't contact me anymore. While repaying my parents for their help, I will continue to do my best to ensure my daughters grow up healthy.